All right, so Nehemiah chapter 7, the wall is built where they're getting the gates on. They have that protection and that establishment of Jerusalem. They finally are back. They have that connection. Now they've got a way to protect themselves. They've got a way to continue to grow to that next level of establishing themselves again as a nation. So a lot of good blessings and opportunities for the Jews, not so good for the people around there that aren't friendly with the Jews. So here we're going to learn a little bit more about this protection and getting more organized together. Verse 1, now it came to pass when the wall was built and I had set up the doors and the porters and the singers and the Levites were appointed. So that's getting the temple together and ready as well. That I gave my brother Hanani and Hananiah, the ruler of the palace, charge over Jerusalem. For he was a faithful man and feared God above many. And I said unto them, let not the gates of Jerusalem be opened until the sun be hot. And while they stand by, let them shut the doors and bar them, and appoint watches of the inhabitants of Jerusalem, every one in his watch, and every one to be over against his house. So this is basically they're limiting access to Jerusalem. He's now appointed people to be his what did he say? It was his brother, my brother Hanani and Hananiah, who is the ruler of the palace. He gave them charge over Jerusalem. So your job, guys, is to oversee the city, make sure it's protected. And he says that don't open until the sun be hot. So we're not opening the doors at the sunrise. We're going to wait till the temperatures rise. It gets hot, so closer to noon, open the doors to Jerusalem to allow people to come and go. But he says, stand there. And so they're not just opening them up and leaving them open from what it sounds like. From what it sounds like is they're opening them up only when people need to come and go, and then they close them and lock them. So they keep it locked down to limit access in and out, basically, and then have people to manage that. Verse 4, now the city was large and great, but the people were few therein, and the houses were not builded. So they still were having tents. They still needed help to build the city itself out. So the temple, probably some of the palace areas, those areas were built out, but now they needed to do more. Verse 5, and my God put into mine heart to gather together the nobles and the rulers and the people, that they might be reckoned by genealogy. And I found a register of the genealogy of them which came up at the first, and found written therein, these are the children of the province that went up out of the captivity of those that had been carried away, whom Nebuchadnezzar king of Babylon had carried away, and came again to Jerusalem and to Judah, every one unto his city. So now he's going to go through this list of the people who were living in Jerusalem and then who were carried away to Babylon. So he goes through this whole group of people, basically. All these different people here. So that's the bulk of this chapter. This chapter seems like a long chapter, but it's kind of short unless you want to read all the names of these people. So as we get down here towards the end, verse 60, all the Nethinims, the children of Solomon's servants, were 392. Nethinims were the people who were the servants of the palace, or not the palace, the temple, basically. We've talked about that in a couple of previous chapters. So let's see, they continued down here until verse 64. These sought their register among those that were reckoned by genealogy, but it was not found. Therefore were they, as polluted, put from the priesthood. So here's something that's interesting is they were following at this time a type of priesthood known as the patriarchal priesthood. Most of that priesthood was gone with Moses. It was taken away. But they're using genealogy to connect the priesthood together. Priesthood was a father to son thing. So they still have a form of the patriarchal priesthood, but it's more of a patriarchal version of the priesthood among the Aaronic priesthood holders, because Melchizedek priesthood was taken by Moses. It wasn't really technically brought back all the way till Jesus. There were some that had that, probably like Isaiah and others. Some of the prophets probably had some of that priesthood with them, but it wasn't necessarily given to the people all the time. And so they're using this genealogy to go through this. So if you can prove, and remember back then too, the priests were the people of the Levites. They were the sons of Aaron. So they had the priesthood and everybody else didn't. So there was kind of a patriarchal order to it, if you will. You had to be a part of these families, otherwise you didn't get the priesthood. And that they're finding is these people are registering, saying, yes, we are family here. We are trying to prove our genealogy. We are of this lineage. And they're like, no, we can't find it that you are. So these people who are given the priesthood, they're kicked out. They're taken away. They can't have the priesthood because it's not following these rules of patriarchal order, basically. Verse 65, and the Tershatha, which is another name for governor, basically, if you look at the footnote there, said unto them that they should not eat of the most holy things till there stood up a priest with Urim and Thummim. So they're kind of like, look, you can't really officiate and administer as much, so we just can't do that. Verse 66, the whole congregation together was 42,303 score, beside their manservants, their maidservants, of whom were 7,337, and they had 245 singing men and singing women. It's a heck of a choir. And their horses, their camels, and everything else. Some of the chief fathers gave unto the work. The Tershatha, or the governor, gave to the treasurer 1,000 drams of gold, 50 basins, 530 priests' garments. Some of the chief of the fathers gave to the treasurer of the work 20,000 drams of gold, 2,200 pounds of silver, and that which the rest of the people gave was 20,000 drams of gold. So now they're preparing to do more to beautify the temple, to do more with getting the priestly orders in place. So remember, they are the ones that live off of the donations from the people, but it's part of those sacrifices and things that supports the priests. So not so the priests can be nobles and be above the people, but because the priests are focused on helping the people administer the gospel and the atonement, basically with them. So that's chapter 7. Let's jump over in chapter 8 as we continue, as Jerusalem and the Jews are continuing to establish themselves better in the land and build their nation back up, basically. This is the beginning again of the Second Temple period.